Right, so it's time for me to change the tyre on my GTS 250, and it's not completely straightforward, this job, because you have to take off the exhaust. You have to bear with me here because the lighting's pretty poor. I'm in my shed here, wooden shed, so it's not exactly the biggest workshop in the world. So the actual can itself, there's 3 bolts that you have to take off. You have to take off this guy here, you have to take off this guy at the back, and then there's one more bolt down here. So you can take those off. They were on pretty tight. I've got this impact gun that I've been using more recently, so I managed to get them off, no problem with those, but they were kind of a little bit tight, so you might need a breaker bar to get them off. So to get at the bolts underneath the scooter, just have a look underneath here and you'll see these 2 studs here that are used for the to bolt the exhaust into the exhaust manifold. So there's 2 studs, one here and one on the other side. Just crack those off, which I've done already. That's the flange that sits on top there, and then there's also another nut that you have to crack off here, which is for the O2 sensor. So just crack that one off. I think it's a 17mm, and you can just use a spanner for that one, and then it just screws out. You don't need to disconnect the O2 sensor, it's kind of hard to get at anyway, so just twist it out, it should be fine. Now with the exhaust can removed, we can start to remove the brake caliper. So to do that, it's just held on 2 bolts here, so easy enough. We'll take those off. Bolts for the brake caliper removed, the caliper just slides up and you can pop it off to the side. At the minute I just have it resting on the swing arm bolt here, but I've got a piece of wire hanger here that I'll use to hang it once I take the actual swing arm off. So the next step then is to remove the bolt for the shock absorber. Right, so to take the caliper off completely, there's actually a screw that holds in a bracket to the swing arm, so we'll have to remove that just to get the brake line freed up and to give this a bit more distance, just to get it out of the way. Bracket off, I've got the caliper just hung up here using a bit of coat hanger, so it's out of the way now, so it gives us plenty of access to get at the rest of this. So the next job is to get off the axle nut, and to do this the best thing to do is just to set the scooter down on its rear wheel so that all the weight of the scooter is on the wheel. If we don't do that, then the whole wheel is going to try and turn when we try and turn the axle nut, so it'll allow us to crack it off hopefully. Now we're going to try and use this torque wrench to get a bit of leverage to crack off the axle nut. So this nut's 24mm. I'm just using an extension bar and the torque wrench to break it off. Using the wheel nut, I've put the bike back onto its centre stand again, which takes the weight off the wheel again. So next step then is to loosen the rest of the bolts on the swing arm, which is this one here and this one down at the bottom. Once we have those 2 off, we'll be able to take the swing arm off. Now that I've got the other 2 swing arm bolts loosened, I'll just go ahead and loosen off the rest of the what's left of the thread on the wheel nut. There we go, that's the wheel nut off. So I've just removed the swing arm, and there you've got the nut, and there's also a collar behind the nut that presses against the bearing. And then down at the tyre itself now, the tyre's free so we can slide it back and forward, and in here there's also another collar or spacer that presses in here, so just you can take that off like so, goes on like that, and then we'll be able to slide the tyre off. We might have to wiggle it around a bit because you do have this mud guard here. You have the shock absorber that needs to be pushed out of the way, so we'll wiggle it off, and that's the tyre ready to be changed over. So I've just gone down to get my new tyre fitted onto the rim of the scooter, and just paid a local tyre fitting place to do it for me instead of having to mess with levers and all of that. So they did it in about 5 minutes literally, and I've got the new tyre fitted. I went for the Michelin City Grip this time round. This tyre actually wasn't really any more expensive than the cheaper tyres and gets plenty of good reviews, so it seems to be a good tyre. You can see the old tyre here, how bald it is right in the middle of the tyre here. There's not much material left in it at all in the centre, so it's time to get it changed over. And just for reference again, that's how much tread is on the new tyre. So we'll reinstall this rim now and get the scooter back up and running again. Now with the wheel back on the axle, I'll put the first collar back on. So the larger end the wider end I should say, goes towards the back here of the axle. And now we'll put on the swing arm. Put the collar back onto the axle again here, has to go in this direction. Once that's on, we can now fit the axle nut back onto the axle, and we'll torque it to the right spec again by dropping the bike off the centre stand and using a torque wrench to torque it to its torque setting. I found these torque settings online in a manual that's available for this particular scooter. So I'll leave a link in the description to the manual too, because it might be useful as a resource for anybody who's looking to work on their own bike. The torque settings that this manual gives are kind of unusual, and that it gives you kilograms force per metre, which isn't the common method of measuring torque here. So it's normally measured in foot-pounds or newton meters. To convert this to newton meters, which is what my torque wrench uses, you just multiply it by a factor of 9.8, or to just do it approximately, just multiply it by around 10. So add another 0 onto these values and you'll get what it should be in newton meters. So it gives you the various settings there for the wheel axle nut, the cushion bolt, which is actually just the bolt for the shock absorber, and various different things, so things like the brake caliper mounting bolts. So hopefully this will be useful to you. So I'll leave that link in the description to the general manual, and basically the rest of the reinstall is just the opposite of removal. Hopefully this video was useful to anybody looking to do the rear tyre change. If the video was useful, please consider hitting like and subscribe. It helps me keep my channel going and stops YouTube from trying to demonetize my channel. I'll also leave 2 links here to 2 other videos that I have. So I have a video on a general review of this model scooter and a video on how to do the oil light reset.